How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 3.
Greetings, America. It is Eric Erickson here across the nation. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, phone lines are open. Don't forget to text golf to 33777 if you want a chance to get one of the Van Allen golf putters. We got to talk about cities because there is an interesting news story out, and credit where it is due. I saw the tweet from John Arnold of Arnold Ventures, who said, "I fear we're watching a city collapse through the vicious cycle of irresponsible governance, severe budget pressure, higher taxes and worse services, the tax base shrinking and causing more severe budget pressure. The problems are so deep and so many decades in the making that even a Daniel Lurie-type mayor can't fix it. Mayors keep promising they will and leave office deeply unpopular because they don't have the levers to stop the cycle." He's talking about Chicago. And I don't know how Chicago gets out of the mess because Chicago just keeps digging deeper holes. This is a story from Bloomberg News. Citadel is shrinking its footprint in Chicago 3 years after billionaire owner Ken Griffin left for Florida, moving the company's remaining operations in the city out of the downtown tower that was named for it, according to people familiar with the matter. The company, which also shifted its headquarters to Miami in 2022, is relocating what's left to a 50,000 square feet space north of Chicago River, said the people, who asked not to be named. The new space is about 10% of what Griffin's financial firm occupied in 2020 as the Citadel Center's main tenant. The 37-story tower is now for sale and no longer carries the name. The firm, which once employed as many as 1,100 people in Chicago, has about 200 employees left in the city after relocations to Miami and New York. Griffin's exit, fueled by his public complaints about high taxes and crime in Chicago, is a cautionary tale for the city. Business leaders say Mayor Brandon Johnson, a progressive Democrat, a socialist, if not a communist, is pushing for a large tax on corporations based on the number of employees. The city council opposes the levy, which former Mayor Rahm Emanuel, also a Democrat, once called a job killer. Citadel isn't the only company to leave Chicago in recent years. Boeing and Caterpillar moved their headquarters elsewhere. Tyson's Food shut down its local offices. But Griffin's decision to move most of his operations was by far the most high-profile exit, taking away some of the most highly paid jobs in finance and millions in philanthropy. It's important for the administration to demonstrate to the business community that they're open for businesses. Orrin Richland, managing principal at Dearborn Capital Group, part owner of the building once called the Citadel Center on 131 South Dearborn Street in the central business district known as the Loop. You want to bring the Citadels and the Caterpillars back to Chicago. Griffin donated more than $600 million to organizations in the Windy City. Chicago's Science Museum got a $125 million gift from him and renamed itself the Kenneth C. Griffin Museum of Science and Industry. Since moving to Miami, he allocated $325 million to institutions in Florida. The top end of Chicago's real estate market also suffered, with Griffin losing about $30 million, selling 6 of his condos in the affluent Gold Coast neighborhood. The sale of his 7th and last property in the city has not yet closed. Chicago is in freefall. This is from the Seattle Times. Chicago didn't ruin Boeing, but the company paid a price for moving out of Seattle. As it turned out, the move seems to have undermined an engineering-friendly culture focused on design, safety, and quality. In retrospect, separating from the critical mass of aerospace experts in Seattle isolated the company's leaders from the heart of their business. Boeing made a financial decision to move to Chicago, which was actually a terrible decision. They never should have done it. This is a growing problem in major cities. I would like to commend the mayor of Atlanta, Georgia. Keisha Lance Bottoms, Keisha Crime Wave Bottoms, was the mayor of Atlanta who sided with the Black Lives Matter protesters in 2020 and sparked mass police resignations and a crime wave in the city of Atlanta. So much so that the financial district of Atlanta, which is the north end of Atlanta and called Buckhead, decided that it wanted to secede and start its own city. Did not happen. The governor and others blocked it. The man who wanted to do it was organizing it, packed up and left in a huff. He's a big Trump supporter, hated the governor, blamed the governor, and the guy said a number of things that could be offensive to a lot of other people, and he lost, played the politics badly, among other things. But also, the mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Crime Wave, decided she couldn't run again. Ironically, she's running for governor now. The woman who sided with the protesters and sparked the crime wave, yes, that woman is running for governor of Georgia. The current mayor of Atlanta, Andre Dawkins, who just won re-election, by the way, had to go into the city of Atlanta and convince the business leaders of the city that he would make the city safe again. And he has done that. Still got ways to go, but crime is definitely down. There's more of a visible police presence, and the people in Buckhead no longer feel like they need to go start their own city. The mayors of Atlanta have traditionally, even when they started electing black Democrats instead of white Republicans or white Democrats, even the black Democrats in the city of Atlanta understood that you got to be business friendly in a city like Atlanta. The city too busy to hate has been the city's nickname. With very few exceptions, the city has courted business leaders and been very pro-business. And what's the result? You've got Porsche, you've got Mercedes-Benz, you've got Coca-Cola, you've got Delta, you've got Home Depot. You've got a massive concentration of Fortune 500 companies have moved into the metro Atlanta area. By the way, changing the demographics in a way that has hurt Republicans to a degree, but also they've been welcomed by a very business-friendly environment where there are issues in the city. There is some wokeism within the city council, but most of them get it. You got to be business-friendly or the businesses can go elsewhere. Chicago has forgotten about that, and New York takes it for granted. San Francisco forgot about it. Seattle and Portland are forgetting about it, where progressive socialist Democrats have made the decision to decline those cities because they live wrapped up in critical theory, where they think everyone is part of a class and white people's days have come to an end and the non-white minority must rise. Andre Dickens, I'm sorry, not Dawkins. And the white people, they've got to be on decline. The black people have to rise. The non-white people need to rise, and we can let go of all sense of justice and law because it's white-coded. We can allow the drug dealers, the drug addicts, the homeless, and the criminals to live because they're only drug addicts, homeless, and criminals because of white people. And what's happening? Businesses are saying, nope, we're leaving. Businesses are saying, nope, we're done. And Chicago is just the latest example. And you will notice something that does not get brought up in right-wing media. And I want to be real honest with you. You're not going to hear a lot of people on the right say this, and you're probably going to think I'm wrong because you're not hearing people say this. Get ready. So far, it seems Zoran Mamdani in New York is trying to thread a needle of being pretty progressive on a lot of social issues, but also trying not to chase off business. He has retained the police chief. He wants the police to police. But he's also wants to overrule the NIMBYs and advance affordable housing by boosting supply and easing development rules. But he's also trying to split the baby and be very progressive on, for example, legalizing prostitution and getting rid of gifted programs at schools, arguing that the rich people are going to private schools anyway, so we don't need to fund these things, and it's a great leveler. He's trying to split the baby. He's trying to do, dare I say, new way or third way socialism. He's looked at the mayor of Chicago. He's looked at the mayors of San Francisco before the current mayor who's trying to turn things around. He's looked at the mayors of Portland and Seattle, and he said, you know what? New York needs to be socialist in a different way. I don't think he's going to get the results he wants, but I do find it very notable that he's trying to be more collaborative with business leaders than a lot of his supporters thought he would be. I don't think it's going to work, and I think ultimately he's going to fall back on his old positions, and New York is going to suffer. But he sees what the mayor of Chicago is doing and understands if we do this, we're going to start a cycle of decline. The mayor of Chicago has embraced a cycle of decline. He doesn't want to deal with violence. He doesn't want to deal with crime. He doesn't want to deal with gangs. He wants to tax wealthy people and businesses and redistribute the money. And wealthy people and businesses have money, and they can pack up and move beyond the jurisdiction of Chicago and beyond the reach of the tax collectors of Chicago in the way poor people can't. A decade ago, 57 Fortune 500 companies were headquartered in Chicago. Not anymore. Been a massive collapse. The Illinois Supreme Court in 2015 killed pension reform, ruling that any changes were unconstitutional. They were beholden, those Supreme Court justices, to unions who got them elected. They have broken Illinois and Chicago with a bunch of progressive policies that you can't bind people to. And this is the thing I think progressives miss. People with means can move. People without means cannot. So when you chase away the rich people who can subsidize the rest of the city, all you got left are the poor people who can't afford to move. And you have declining revenue, a declining tax base, and an increase in the need for social services because the charitable giving in the city goes down. And so the government has to step up to replace the social services that were otherwise funded by the charity of the rich people who have left. Democrats can't govern at the local level. They keep getting in charge. There are some exceptions. Andre Dickens in Atlanta, a great exception to the rule. He's been very good for the police, very good with businesses. People like him, and he threads the needle very well. The other Democratic mayors in the nation could watch the mayor of Atlanta and learn a thing or two. The mayor of Chicago is the example of what not to do. The mayors of Portland and Seattle. And here's the thing. If the Democrats take it all back, if they get back in the White House and they take back Congress, they will start demanding bailouts. They will reason that the rich people unfairly fled, and we must tax the rich to bail out Chicago and San Francisco and Portland and Seattle. Even San Francisco has swung back to the right. They haven't crossed center line. They're still progressive, but not nearly as progressive as they were in a backlash in the reaction to crime and education in the city. There will be a backlash that comes in Chicago. The question is just how far can the backlash happen, in large part because they've chased away all the people who might oppose it. We are watching in real time one of the great American cities collapse under the weight of the corrupt and brain-rotted communist ideas of a city. And sadly, the majority of the people there get what they voted for. And those people are now ready to chase that mayor out of office, but he's still there screwing things up. This is the beginning, not the end of it. And it's very notable to me that Mamdani in New York seems to be pulling back on some of his policies as he looks on in Chicago and says, we don't want to be like them. Greetings, welcome. It's Eric Erickson, 877-973-7425. To the phones we go to Larry. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fine, sir. I've been listening to you since the beginning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the Eden Pure. We love it.
Great, excellent.
So just wanted to get your take on this. You're a smart guy, and I've learned a lot from you and appreciate it very much. But I live in a metro area, and outside the metro area, we have a strange thing happening where we have the local government, and I've seen this happen other places too, is pushing for some type of affordable housing designation in a way to overlay onto the existing zoning categories and so forth that have been adopted for years and years and years, and fought for, by the way. So we don't really understand where it's coming from, since their classification of affordable housing, there's hundreds of houses that fit within their description of said affordable housing, and the bureaucracy that they are proposing to adopt would include monitoring, neighborhood agreement acts, median income averaging, and so on and so forth, and it's for sale. We don't understand really what is the driver to this, and this kind of related to what you were talking about. Yeah. You know, in some of your
Larry, I can tell you, it's essentially a backdoor to projects in many cases. There are the government programs that have been created that allow local communities to push affordable housing, and essentially it creates Section 8 housing. And Section 8 housing, of course, brings in people into communities and economically, frankly, changes those communities. And I don't think there's a coincidence that in areas with high concentrations of Section 8 housing, you have increases in crime. There are ways to do this, but those ways don't get government funding and don't get government subsidy. The way to do it is to just make it easier to build houses. You make the zoning regulations easier, the land use regulations easier. You allow people to build on quarter-acre lots instead of requiring one-acre lots, things like that. But that doesn't get you government funding. It doesn't get you government grants. The government funding and the government grants and the government programs and the government waivers come through an expansion of affordable housing that can be used as Section 8 housing. And that's what governments want to do, because they get money if they do it that way. What they don't seem to understand is that if they just allow developers to build a lot of houses, they'll get a lot of people. And if they allow the developers to build good houses in those neighborhoods, they'll get taxpayers and grow a tax base, as opposed to subsidized housing with Section 8. But the subsidized housing comes with immediate money, and allowing the developers to build on lots and sell to people who can build the tax base takes time, and these communities are in a hurry for the cheap housing. And it's a real problem out there, and it's one I don't think Republicans appreciate enough. The expansion of Section 8 housing is actually a bad thing, not a good thing. It's no coincidence that as Section 8 housing has expanded in neighborhoods near me, the local grocery stores have experienced an uptick in shootings. It's Section 8 housing incorporates crime. That's just the truth that people don't like to talk about. Hello there. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Let me jump over to the phones. Jeff, welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
Eric, I'm terrific. Thank you. I hope you are.
I am. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, good to hear from you. I'm a regular listener. Don't call in often. But I want to jump back to your call with that businessman who actually was forced to hire non-citizens, is the word I use, just to be able to staff his workforce to be able to do the job for his customers. I faced the same situation with the small business we had in southeast Georgia. And I had non-citizens, illegals, working for us, and it took us a while to tap into that market. And when we finally did, we actually had a great workforce. And I want to talk about them being stopped and driver's license and that kind of thing, because you'll recall I shared with you about a month ago that in Georgia actually issues driver's license that look like the one you and I carry in Georgia, looks exactly like the driver's license that citizens carry. And they do it all the time. But so two things. I want to first of all dispel the myth that hiring non-citizens lowers the labor rate, because in actuality, when we brought illegals, non-citizens into our workforce, it actually increased our cost of labor because they worked, and we had to raise the rate of pay in order to get them to work for us. But I will tell you, they produced, and it was a great labor fine for us. But I was curious. So that's a myth about bringing in non-citizens or illegals lowers the labor rate. That's untrue. They were hard workers, and they deserved every penny that they earned. But, it was interesting over the many years that we had those folks working for us. We could see that over the years, they began to pick up the bad work ethics of the citizens around them, and started to slough off a little bit, because in our market, there's hard to find good people who didn't want to just show up for a paycheck, that kind of thing. You know how that is. But I was curious about the gentleman you were talking to that pre-Trump, when people were stopped, when his employees were stopped, he didn't quite flesh out that they were stopped by the police. I was curious if they were actually issued a ticket, if they had a driver's license, if they were issued a ticket.
So I'm honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know who stopped them, and my guess is that oftentimes they were stopped and let go. Probably by the local police more than anything. Although, Jeff, I will tell you, concurrent to that with your experience, there are a lot of people I know who actually have, particularly in the farm and in agricultural sector, been able to hire illegal aliens to pick crops and stuff, in large part because they don't have to raise the wages there. If they, and they have the complaint, the farmers down in South Georgia and elsewhere who pick the crops and stuff say that they can't hire American citizens without paying an exorbitant amount of money. And in paying that exorbitant amount of money, they couldn't charge, or they couldn't sell the crops because nobody wants to buy the peaches if every peach is $10 based on what they would have to pay. And so a lot of them, they hire undocumented. But then, of course, you've got labor regulations that in some cases, if you're on the up and up, it makes it hard. For those of you who are listening and reacting to all of this and your head is exploding, I would just say that part of the conversation about illegal immigration in the United States has been dumbed down and simplified so much. And at the end of the day, if you want to simplify it in a new direction to think about the issue, think about employers who they tried to find American citizens and couldn't. Here's my problem. I don't think people should be hiring illegal aliens because it provides an incentive for them to come to the country and get work. I don't think our businesses should hire illegal aliens. Concurrently, businesses need workers. We are a nation in population decline. There are every day being born fewer Americans than are dying. At some point, we're going to have a real jobs crisis in this country where there aren't enough people here legally to do the job. So you're going to have to find other people to do it. And we've got to start having those conversations now to prepare for the next 20 years. Labor is a real problem. Labor is a real problem in this country, and both sides get very dogmatic about it when it's actually you talk to any employer in the country, particularly in blue-collar jobs, and it is a more difficult conversation than you might think. There are absolutely companies who hire illegal aliens because they can get them cheaper than Americans. But there are also companies like Jeff was talking about where you keep having to pay them more. You're not getting super cheap labor. There are also in the agriculture industry for the farms that are on the up and up. There are mass numbers. We've got our resident labor lawyer, Chad, who listens from Montgomery, Alabama. And Chad has called in and explained that particularly in the ag sector, there are so many federal regulations, it's really hard for farms that are on the up and up to hire illegal aliens because of how they're monitored and the pay they have to pay. They can't pay the rock bottom wages. There actually is an agricultural wage rate they have to pay. And I actually didn't even know that was a thing until he called in. And he's a highly regarded labor lawyer in Alabama and knows his stuff and does this. And he's like, it is a myth that farms are hiring super cheap illegal aliens in this country. It really is a myth. They are certainly being hired in construction and other fields, but not agriculture, because of the way agriculture is regulated in this country at the federal level for mass agricultural harvests. But this is a way more difficult conversation than people want. On the right, it is deport them all, and on the left, it is import them all. And in the middle are a lot of business who say, I can't find employees. And we don't talk about that aspect of it. We make it very binary when it shouldn't be. Now, I got to move on because something has just happened in Congress you need to know about. Very interesting situation. There has been a revolt in the United States House of Representatives. 4 Republicans have joined Democrats and broken with House leadership and signed on to a Democratic-led plan to force a House vote on extending for 3 years an enhanced pandemic-era subsidy. This is from the Associated Press. The stunning move comes after House Republican leaders pushed ahead with a health care bill that does not address soaring monthly premiums that millions of people will soon endure when the tax credits for those who buy insurance through the Affordable Care Act expire. The action sets the stage for a renewed intra-party clash over health care in January, something Republican leaders had been working to avoid just weeks before another government funding deadline at the end of that month. The moderate Republicans were able to force the issue by signing a petition led by Democrat leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York to vote on a bill that would extend the subsidies for 3 years. Republicans Brian Fitzpatrick, Robert Bresnahan, and Ryan McKenzie, all from Pennsylvania, and Mike Lawler of New York, signed on Wednesday morning, pushing it to the magic number of 218. A vote on the subsidy bill could come as soon as January under House rules. So you got 4 moderate Republicans. Notice they call them centrists when it's Republicans. The Democrats are moderates. The Republican moderates are centrists. They've broken ranks. This is happening more and more. By the way, you should also know that something has happened in the Senate that is very relevant to this. This is from the New York Times, the Washington Post. At least 2 U.S. senators have placed holds on the nomination of Admiral Kevin Lundy to serve as the Coast Guard's commandant after the service enacted a new workplace harassment policy that downgrades the definition of swastikas and nooses from hate symbols to potentially divisive. The actions by Senators Tammy Duckworth, Democrat of Illinois, and Jackie Rosen, Democrat of Nevada, follows a Washington Post report on Tuesday revealing that despite Lundy's forceful denunciation of such symbols and a separate directive he issued prohibiting them, the service allowed the policy to take effect with the potentially divisive language included. A spokesperson for Lundy, who's been the service's acting commandant for several months, did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Neither did a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security. Now, these are Democrats, so no big deal, except behind the scenes, Republicans as well are okay with the hold. And Republicans in the Senate are pushing forward with the National Defense Authorization Act. And John Cornyn of Texas is calling on the Pentagon to release the full video of the blowing up of the boat in the Caribbean. What is going on here? We are rapidly headed to every man for himself territory in the United States Congress as Republicans fear Democrats are going to win. And they don't think the Trump administration is responsive to their needs. They don't like the Trump Legislative Affairs team, the Jameses, they call them, the 2 guys named James. They feel like the White House has abused them and taken advantage of them. And they're ready to break ranks now. A lot of this is because of the midterms. A lot of this is because people see the writing on the wall. The Democrats are going to take the House. The Republicans, by the way, you should know behind the scenes, Republicans are starting to get nervous about the Senate. Yes, Republicans are starting to get nervous about the Senate. And they really think the House is lost. And their great concern in all of this is themselves. They want to save themselves. And they are losing faith in Donald Trump. Lame duck status is setting in. They're losing faith in Mike Johnson. They're losing faith in Donald Trump. They're losing faith in the Republicans' ability to provide a coherent message to win. And they have rapidly headed towards every man for himself. That, by the way, is never a good sign. It's never a good sign that the party is now herding cats. It's always more difficult to herd the Republicans than the Democrats because Republicans tend to be less collectivist and more individual. The Democrats understand they got to have power to do things. A lot of Republicans want to block things from getting done. They don't want to do things. So it's always easier for the Democrats to herd their cats. Nancy Pelosi could be an effective leader of the Democrats because they were Democrats. Nancy Pelosi would be having a lot of the same problems as she were leading Republicans that Mike Johnson is having or that before him Kevin McCarthy was having because Republicans are all much more independent. Democrats are much more homogenous these days, too. You're far more likely to find a pro-abortion Republican than you are to find a pro-life Democrat. You're far more likely to find a pro-trans Republican than you are to find a Democrat who thinks that men can't become women. The Republicans are a much more diverse party these days. Now, the media doesn't say it that way. The Democrats insist it's not so, but the reality is so. And the result is through that diversity of idea, it's harder to control. It's harder to rally. It's harder to manage. And right now, the Republicans are starting to break serious ranks because they see the writing on the wall of where the nation is headed and where the elections are headed, and they just don't necessarily, like the direction of things.
And now we're sitting here and we're listening to nonsense about health care, where my colleagues on the other side of the aisle sit here saying, well, you guys aren't doing anything about the massive expensive cost of health care. Why do you think it's expensive? Because you literally cut a deal with insurance companies to run health care. You think that's going to run wild? Yeah. That's why they have 2,000% profit increases, and the American people can't afford to go to the doctor of their choice while we enrich insurance companies. And yet Republicans will complain about it, and then they'll offer milquetoast garbage like we're offering this week, and then go home at Christmas and say, look at what we're doing. We're campaigning on reducing health care. Well, congratulations. At some point, people will look at this body and say, maybe we should get rid of all 435 members of the House and all 100 members of the Senate and start over, because Congress is literally failing the American people. I yield back.
That's Chip Roy. By the way, he's leaving. He's running for Attorney General in Texas. He's fed up with it, too. Absolutely fed up with it. Neither side wants to actually do anything to fix the problem. Both sides just want to blame the other side. The Republicans see the writing on the wall. They're going to lose the House of Representatives. They're worried about the Senate. They don't think the president has their best interests at heart. They think he's all about himself and he doesn't care about them, which gets you the Rob Reiner comments, which push the Republicans on defense. And so they're kind of done with it. Lame duck status comes a little early for the president because everybody's frustrated with his inability to stay on message, expecting them to stay on his message. And they don't really have a message. This is going to be a rough coming year for the GOP unless they can actually find something that unites them. Well done, Russia. A drone attack that misfired and wound up hitting the Chernobyl reactor has caused a crack in the radioactive shielding, and the United Nations is sounding the alarm that Eastern Europe risks a radioactive breach from Chernobyl because of what the Russians did. Geniuses. Folks, at the end of the program here, I've just got to mention Norman Podhoretz has passed away. His son, John Podhoretz, is now the editor of Commentary, where Norman was for a very long time. I sent John a note this morning. His father was one of the great men of the 20th century, in early 21st century. Let me read you this from John Podhoretz. My father died tonight, December 16th, a month shy of his 96th birthday. Norman Podhoretz passed peacefully and without pain with a new translation of the Odyssey on his desk that had been sent to him by his friend Roger Hertog. It sat next to a copy of Alexander Pope's legendary translation, which he had asked my sister Naomi to order for him so he could compare the two. At the very end of his life, Norman Podhoretz was his truest self, a man of letters. His greatest teachers, the men who had the most profound effect on him, Lionel Trilling at Columbia and F.R. Leavis at Cambridge, were critics who believed the life of the mind as expressed in literature was a high and noble calling. And I don't think it's bragging to say that he was a great literary critic, the last and maybe finest flowering of the group often called the partisan review crowd, though he did not write much for PR and published his most remarkable work in commentaries pages, beginning with the review of Herman Malamud's first novel, The Natural, pushed at the ripe old age of 23. Our website records he published 145 articles in these pages from 1953 to his final appearance in a colloquy with me about the magazine in November of 2020. There will be much to be said about him in the days and weeks and months to come. I'll say more, as will many, many others. But right now, what I think you might be most surprised to know about my father is not that he was an astonishingly courageous intellectual force, though he was, nor that his determination to remain true to his ideas, his country, and his people were actually profoundly costly to him in terms of the hostility that he generated and the friends he lost, though all of that is true, nor that he changed America and the world with his own work. Those 145 articles, 2 decades of newspaper columns in the New York Post and the Washington Post, and 12 books, and his 35 years at the helm of this magazine, unequivocally and arguably one of the most important editorships in American history, though he did. What you really need to know is that what mattered most to him was writing, great writing, good writing, clear writing, honest writing. He was the most literate man I've ever known, possessed of an encyclopedic knowledge of the written word in our time, and in times past, who found true moral, intellectual, and aesthetic purpose in the act of reading and deciphering and comprehending, and he was himself a prose stylist of magnificence. There's no other word for it. Now, Norman Podhoretz, you may not know him, but with his words literally changed the world. He was an intellectual icon and a legend on the right and the left, shifting his worldview over time. And my prayers for the Podhoretz family. A legend has passed to history.